Off the coast of South Africa, mystery surrounds the sudden appearance of a gang of blacktip sharks.
Around the world, people have been bitten by blacktips, and badly so.
For a group of sharks to arrive en masse, at the moment I'd say it's a mystery.
The blacktip pack is terrorizing the neighborhood, putting livelihoods at risk.
When I first went commercial fishing, if we lost 1% of our fish to sharks, it was a lot. But now, we're losing up to 80%.
Normally, sharks are loners. These sharks have formed a gang.
It did appear to me that there was a more organized social structure than just a wild free-for-all.
Shark scientists are amazed. This should not be happening.
There's no doubt that these animals are learning.
It was a surprise, yes.
If you actually can find consistent grouping that has got social structure, you're really reinventing shark science.
What's behind the blacktip shark mystery? The wild waters off the east coast of South Africa are world famous for ocean predators. In 20 years, dive boat operator and shark expert Mark Addison thought he had seen it all, until one day 7 years ago.
7th of May 2006 really sticks out in my mind. I went out expecting anything from tiger sharks, bulls, white sharks even. Got there and suddenly the world just opened up.
Mark was on his way out to dive the Aliwal Shoal, a 5-kilometer reef which attracts a wide range of marine wildlife.
Got out there expecting good things, putting the bait in the water, still gave away nothing.
Mark dives the reef regularly to pinpoint where the sharks are. To avoid disturbing them, he dives without tanks.
I certainly think I've been able to observe more freediving than I would have in scuba, and it's given me more of an observation platform. And of course, it's the most amazing sensation, just drifting in 3 dimensions.
He'd baited the water, so it was no surprise to see sharks. But he was expecting 1 or 2 tiger sharks. That's not how it turned out.
At this stage, nothing gave away what I was about to see.
Suddenly, from out of the murky depths, Mark was confronted by 4 blacktip sharks.
What makes this so unique, it's not that there are no blacktips around the Aliwal Shoal, but 1 or 2. 3 or 4 would be an outrageous day with blacktips, and believe me, normally that's a handful.
But within minutes, the unusual 4 had swelled to an unsettling 10.
To get so many sharks into one place at the same time generally requires a scavenging or feeding event of some proportion. And I was looking around thinking, I've got 10 sardines in the drum, that's not going to cut it, and then there's me.
Mark had never encountered a group of so many blacktips, but the numbers kept growing.
Suddenly looking up and seeing a wall of blacktip sharks. To say it took my breath away was probably the least description I could give to it. It was absolutely amazing.
But it wasn't just the size of the group that was unprecedented. Their behavior over the coming years would have Mark questioning everything we thought we knew about sharks.
That day, 7th of May 2006, it was just amazing. From then on, everything changed.
What had suddenly brought these large numbers of blacktip sharks to Aliwal Shoal? And who exactly were these mysterious shark invaders?
We've got a male blacktip shark. The shark's about 1.6 meters long. We measure what we call precaudal length, which length excludes the tail. But if we include the tail, we're looking at 2.1 meters. So this is about full size for a blacktip.
If people ever want to picture a blacktip, you almost have to think of what does the typical sharky shark look like. And that is a blacktip. Confident, very pugnacious. You know, you put a sardine in the water, that thing's gone like that. They've got big attitude.
They're magnificent. To see them underwater, I think of them as jet fighters. They're fantastically well-adapted predators. They move very quickly with a kind of wide-awake attitude.
It's a combination of the shape of the teeth, the very streamlined body, and a feature which one can't often see in dead blacktips, but you certainly see it very clearly on live blacktips, is this pattern running down the side of the body.
Before their sudden appearance in 2006, blacktip sharks were rare on the reef and had never been recorded in large numbers. Something strange was happening.
Seeing a lot of big predators like blacktip sharks aggregated in an area does start to pose some questions. You know, what is going on?
For a group of sharks to arrive en masse overnight is pretty unusual. Why that happened? At the moment, I'd say it's a mystery.
Marine life on the coast of South Africa is controlled by a number of annual cycles, the most important of which is the Sardine Run, one of the most extraordinary marine spectacles on the planet. From May to July, millions of sardines migrate up the east coast, attracting predators of all kinds.
You have these massively dense shoals of sardines, and whilst that is maintained, you just have these predators coming in from left and right, from the air, from below, all over, just feeding on it.
The Sardine Run is an enormously important source of food for many shark species, and their migration cycles revolve around it.
This phenomenon has happened over thousands of years, and the predators that feed on sardine have adapted their life histories and their strategies to link into this.
The sharks have developed an innate clock where they know that at this time of the year, that's when the sardines are going to come up.
Aliwal Shoal is not normally a destination for blacktips. It's thought they pass by to intercept the sardine migration further south, but they would not stop here. But the Sardine Run appears to be changing. Scientist Alan Connell has been studying sardine spawning for 25 years and has noticed their numbers are falling.
Since 1987, I've been documenting fish spawning in the area. So I see the sardines' eggs coming in the winter time when we get our sardine run. It's surprising in some ways that sardines even come here, because the food is not good, the water tends to be marginally the right temperature, and in the more recent years I've been getting less eggs. It has already started to become more unpredictable.
The 2006 Sardine Run was one of the poorest on record. So did the blacktip sharks detour to Aliwal Shoal in search of new food? And if they did, surely they'd migrate back north at the end of the season. They didn't.
It really surprised me when we went past these very important markers in blacktip occurrence on our coast. We passed all of those datums where people said to me, they'll be gone, and they stayed. If anything, the numbers have got bigger.
The blacktips were going nowhere. Now, with no sardines to feed them, the gang turned maverick.
They bite the salmon off right behind the heads. See, that's what I'm talking about.
Their numbers were unprecedented,
I didn't think there were that many.
and their behavior was sparking conflict.
I don't know how many sharks are down there, but boy, they are taking lots and lots of fish.
When large numbers of blacktip sharks unexpectedly made their home off the east coast of South Africa, it shocked shark expert and dive boat operator Mark Addison.
The initial thoughts came to me that maybe they were just passing through and momentarily they would flit off and never come back. And yet every day we would get there and the sharks would still be there. And that was unique.
It seemed the sharks were here to stay. And the problem went far beyond Aliwal Shoal. For many miles north and south, fishermen were losing their nighttime catch of heelbeck, large Cape salmon, to sharks.
We'll give it one more try here, Tom, and then we'll go try maybe Maggie's.
Okay. We'll go to a reef, bait up our tackle, let down the line, hook a fish, reel it up.
You feel straight away a tug on your line, or if he swims in the opposite way, a slack on the line. So you retrieve the slack as fast as possible and retrieve the fish as fast as possible.
Well, Gerald's on. Come on, Gerald, bring him, boy, bring him.
But it's very strenuous. I mean, 50 meters of water, it probably takes on average about, say, 3 minutes.
Beautiful.
Gotcha.
But the 3 minutes it takes to reel in these big Cape salmon had become a battle between fishermen and unseen sharks.
Yeah, I think I've got a shark.
The sharks pick up the vibration of the fish in distress and they tackle it.
The sharks will take the fish anywhere, right from on the bottom, right up to as you put in the gaff.
Look at that.
Bloody thing.
They bite the salmon off right behind the head. They don't even leave you with half an inch of meat left there. See, that's what I'm talking about.
Local fishermen are used to losing some of their catch. This coastline's home to many species of shark, but theft on this scale was unprecedented.
I don't know how many sharks are down there, but boy, they are taking lots and lots of fish.
Was this the shark gang from Aliwal Shoal? No one knew for sure, but there were a lot more sharks around, and they were causing problems.
I hear fishermen talk about going out, hooking into, say, 30 keelbeck and, say, 30 a night, and only managing to get 1 or 2 out, if they're lucky.
When I first went commercial fishing in '89, if we lost 1% of our fish to sharks, it was a lot. Now, we're losing up to 80%. It's come to a stage where it's actually not economically viable to go commercial fishing anymore. Yeah.
Were the Blacktips really responsible for taking the fishermen's catch? If so, the gang was ranging far beyond Aliwal Shoal. But there was another possibility. Mark Addison's dive business was centered on a very different shark. The formidable tiger shark, one of the largest and most feared marine predators in the world, and a big tourist attraction.
The tigers had become a huge passion, and it created an international following. And that was really my focus. The blacktips I saw as an unnecessary diversion, and very quickly they imposed themselves on the tigers, so much so that they chased the tigers away.
Remarkably, the Blacktips were using their superior numbers to drive away the much larger tiger sharks, turning the normal marine hierarchy on its head.
They would absolutely undo every attempt I made to attract tiger sharks in. They had an innate ability to outthink us, which really isn't much fun being outsmarted by a fish every day of your life, but this became the challenge.
There is nothing new about animals grouping together. Birds in flocks, bees in swarms. Big-brained mammals are even more sophisticated. They work together and share the rewards. But many shark species are hardwired to be solitary. Even though large numbers will gather where food is plentiful or to breed, each shark looks out for itself. Collaboration in sharks would be a major discovery. Mark has no scientific background, but when he saw the Blacktips apparently acting as a pack to drive away the tiger sharks, it convinced him they had learned behavior beyond their basic instincts. This realization has turned the Blacktips from being Mark's enemy to the object of his fascination.
I've come to admire them now and certainly know them to be a super predator, and am fascinated by, how they've managed to outmuscle much bigger and much stronger opposition.
While Mark learned more about the Blacktips, further north, the fishermen were wondering if they were responsible for the loss of their catch. Or could it be the tiger sharks that the Blacktips had run off? Certainly, autopsy results on blacktips from around the world would seem to exonerate them of the crime.
These teeth are fairly narrow and sharply pointed, so they have fairly limited cutting ability. So they restrict blacktip sharks to relatively small prey, mackerel, sardines, herrings, and also squid and octopus from time to time. We've obviously looked at a lot of stomachs from blacktip sharks, and while one finds a fairly wide variety of fish, they're generally relatively small. Here, the backbone of a very, very small fish, probably no bigger than 10 centimeters.
The blacktip's small and limited cutting teeth suggested they were not capable of catching large, free-swimming fish. But fishermen were convinced of their guilt.
Fishing at night, it's hard to see exactly what type of shark's eating your fish all the time. But we've seen the sizes, the silhouettes in the water. And also, you can tell by the bite, if you've got a head with a straight cut, it's a big shark. Where if you see a bit of a roundness, it's a smaller shark.
The bite patterns on the Cape salmon seemed convincing. These huge fish were being taken by relatively small sharks. Not tigers, but blacktips. But how?
The moment that keelback is caught by a fisherman, it's relatively restricted. And for the blacktip, that then becomes an easy meal. And provided he can get a reasonable amount of purchase with those sharp teeth, just by shaking his head from side to side, he can then sever the body from the head.
This suggested something remarkable. The blacktips had forced out the tiger sharks and were taking advantage of the fishermen, stealing fish they couldn't catch by themselves. Back at Aliwal Shoal, Mark Addison's newfound fascination for the blacktips had set him on a quest to find out more. His investigations inspired him to seek out expert help. He contacted marine biologist Jessica Escobar, who was conducting her own comprehensive DNA study of South African blacktips.
I'm very excited because genetics is a technique that you can go get a tissue, and then even if the animals disappear, even if the animals don't come back again, we'll be able to answer more questions.
From the outset, collecting DNA samples from this gang of blacktips proved a challenge.
So with Mark, we started using this biopsy gun, but at the tip of it has a cylinder. As it hits the shark, it just sucks in about 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters of tissue. Then I get skin, fat, and then muscle itself.
Mark and Jess sampled 40 sharks. They reckoned that was over half the group. But as the sampling continued, they were able to make a startling new tally of the true number of sharks.
When you take the sample from the animal, it leaves a mark on the dorsal. So what we were able to do was to go out every day and count how many of them were back there with the mark.
Mark and Jess were shocked to discover that the gang was huge. They hadn't sampled half the sharks. It was barely a fifth.
We were able to count how many animals we saw on the dive and how many other animals we saw. So out of the total population, what we were seeing, and well, we were seeing somewhere between 30 and 40%. So all of a sudden, went from 60 to way over 200.
It was a surprise, yes. I didn't think there were that many.
200 sharks acting as a gang. Quite a shock for a species that's always been thought of as solitary. But the project also threw up an even bigger surprise. A level of organization beyond anything they'd yet seen. Sharks that had been shot with the sample gun appeared to know Mark and Jess were planning to sample more. They were deliberately protecting their fellow pack members.
We have sampled 5 of them, 6 of them. Well, they know they have been sampled. because they stay around. They're not scared of the gun anymore. They're not scared of anything. They just come and swim around and swim around, and actually do not let you aim for the one that you need to still sample. They'll come across like this. Well, you have this other one here that you're trying to get to.
If the blacktips are looking out for each other, it means a whole new level of shark sophistication. Were they really working as a gang? And if so, did they have a leader?
She's the boldest, she's the smartest, and I think she leads the pack.
But Mark wasn't the only one pursuing the sharks.
Best form of defense is attack. Don't give him the upper hand.
Some of the fishermen, they will try and kill those sharks.
In May 2006, a gang of blacktip sharks arrived on South Africa's Aliwal Shoal, taking charge of the reef and antagonizing local fishermen. Dive boat operator and shark expert Mark Addison was on the hunt for answers, but every new discovery raised more questions. Attempts to take DNA samples had even suggested the gang might be organized. Could they really be witnessing sophisticated behavior never before seen in this relatively unstudied species?
In terms of the scientific community and the amount of work done on blacktip sharks, it's probably not that high on the priority list. But as you get into this research, you realize you've got to study and understand all of them to get a real picture of what makes a shark a shark.
Mark's study of this group of sharks had turned into a mission. During his daily dives, he was piecing together a picture of what was going on within his blacktip gang. But he was running out of leads.
So we started looking at individuals and profiling how often those individuals were with us.
Mark's thorough observations suggested many of the sharks were returning to his dive site over and over again.
19 sharks in one frame.
He quickly came to the conclusion that the blacktips on Aliwal Shoal were a stable population with little coming and going. But what was a complete revelation was that the gang wasn't made up of angry young males. This shark gang was 100% female. Mark even thinks he has pinpointed the leader of the gang.
Very soon after the blacktip arrival, I became aware of a bigger blacktip that seemed to dominate the interactions, and very easily she was given the name Mrs. B, as in Mrs. Blacktip. This is definitely Mrs. B. I'm looking, and above her pectoral fin, she's got two little white flecks, which for me are a key giveaway in identifying her.
The idea that blacktip sharks could have a social hierarchy is completely new to science, but Mark thinks Mrs. B is the top shark.
She definitely seems to be the dominant animal in a feeding interaction. So she will certainly, if she's making a run at a bait and another shark's making a run at the bait, it will give way to her. And those are the little subtleties that I've noticed with her, which leads me to believe that she's the dominant shark. She definitely commands pride of place in the feeding environment. She's the boldest, she's the smartest, and I think she leads the pack.
Mark's theory that the blacktips had a leader was potentially groundbreaking, but scientists were skeptical.
If you actually can find that this group of sharks is a consistent grouping, has got social structure, you're really reinventing shark science and understanding of shark ecology and taking it to a whole new level, a level that's equitable to mammals or insects, which has really never been done before. You're onto something big.
To back up his hierarchy theory, Mark attempts to enlist a spy on the inside of the pack, ideally Mrs. B herself.
This is an opportunity with a remote camera on the shark to see what the shark does of its own accord. And that way, we'll learn and see what they do when we're not there.
Attaching the camera to any shark proved a challenge. Finally, Mark got his camera attached, but not to Mrs. B. It was not ideal, but at least he had something to study. Shark society, seen from the shark's point of view.
Right, so I'm now looking at the footage of putting the camera on the shark. Okay, now I swam down, put the camera over the dorsal fin, shark swims away. She's gone off, away from the bait. Kind of expected that. I think she's not sure what's on her back now. Or on the dorsal, that is. Okay, we're coming back in. Gee, that was a quick return to normal.
The camera shows that after a brief detour into undisputed neutral waters, Mark's blacktip returns to the hot zone around the bait.
There's a bait. She went for, got outcompeted, swims out now. Back out to the neutral zone. So you're seeing this constant reinforcement, this vorticing around into a neutral zone, into the hot zone, into a neutral zone, into the hot zone.
By moving between hot and neutral zones, the sharks avoid conflict with each other.
She's out on her own now.
It's a fascinating glimpse into their behavior, but it's short-lived.
Oh, she's trying to throw the camera. Oh, she's shaking the camera off. Oh. Almost looked like she was going to breach. Camera off and she's come back to bite it. She's bitten the camera. Bang. I'm sure she's just trying to figure out what it is. Pity that it ended there because it was just starting to get interesting.
A single camera shot is not enough for conclusive proof, but Mark was convinced that he was seeing evidence of social behavior. The sharks were taking turns to feed.
Analysing the footage, what I can see clearly is they'll come tight for a moment or two and then move back out to a less conflictual area. These non-conflict zones and conflict zones are critical to these animals' movement.
Mark's inside observations convinced him that the blacktip gang had worked out how to limit conflicts by sharing. But the way the pack came together each morning continued to puzzle him. The moment one shark had found the bait, it seemed they all knew where to come.
Sometimes it would take 40 minutes, 50 minutes for the first animal to arrive. And what blew me away is shortly after that, 10, 15 minutes later, you'd end up with the pack.
Mark believed the sharks had to be communicating with each other, a leap well beyond anything scientists had observed before. But how can an animal without vocal cords communicate? Mark thought he had seen exactly how.
There was a very unique moment where the shark would open its jaw and snap it shut. And it was apparent to me that it was using this sound to draw other sharks in.
Sharks communicating by sound is unknown to science and has never been recorded or filmed. But sound can travel for miles underwater, and sharks are perfectly equipped to detect it.
A very important sense, not only for sharks but all fish, is this ability to pick up vibrations in the water. And that is done by means of the lateral line system, which runs down the side of the body.
This, combined with their internal ears, means that sharks can hear very low frequencies, similar to those Mark suggests, that would be created by a snapping jaw.
It's a subsonic frequency, and in water, it sounds like a gunshot. This gunshot travels further and faster underwater. It gets the next shot. The next shot says, hey, you know, Billie Jean's found something up there. Let's go and have a look. And off they go. And this is how they aggregate together and then find the source.
Skeptics might argue there's an easier explanation. The sharks were simply attracted by the bait. But Mark was convinced that the blacktip gang were communicating.
Can sharks talk? I guess that is the question. They don't have vocal cords, let's face it. They don't talk to each other. They're not like whales, they're not like dolphins. They don't squeak, they don't click, they don't communicate vocally. The idea that they can, however, manipulate water, that is still open, that's still possible.
Scientists are not yet convinced by Mark's theory that the blacktip gang communicates using sound. But something was keeping the gang organized, and the sharks were growing bolder. The The Blacktips were soon to come into conflict again.
I have had a friend bit in the water with me, and he was being aggressive and it didn't help, and he nearly lost his foot to it.
And the locals are fighting back.
Blacktips have borne the brunt of the fisherman's vitriol. And you can just see the hole it's made. They've blasted right through.
We think of sharks as solitary, mindless killers. But in 2006, off the coast of South Africa, blacktip sharks formed a gang of up to 200 strong. Dive operator Mark Addison was convinced they showed signs of organized behavior, even communicating using snaps of their jaws. But while experts failed to agree on what held the gang together, the sharks' natural instincts were causing trouble. The next source of conflict, local spear fishermen.
Spearfishing is a very different style of hunting in a sense, and to make it even harder, you have to do it while you're holding your breath. So you've got to try and remain perfectly calm under extreme adrenaline rush situation.
Keeping your cool is easier said than done when you're in blacktip territory.
A lot of the time you have to just shut off and just ignore the possibility of seeing a shark.
For these spear fishermen, brushes with blacktips have become unavoidable.
If you shoot a fish, the noise of a fish struggling in the water will definitely call a shark in. A shark can hear that fish in the water from a long way out of visibility, and it'll call it in immediately. As soon as one latches onto a fish on your spear, it'll wake the others up and they'll be rushing in as well. You can't control a shark once it's grabbed hold of a fish on your spear. It's just going to swim away from you with that. Probably bend your spear or break off the line.
With blacktip ambushes on the rise, some fishermen have chosen to fight back.
If you see one, the first thing you do is start to swim towards it, because they interpret that as a body language where you're not scared of them.
Best form of defense is attack. Don't give him the upper hand.
Individual shark is quite easy to intimidate, but as soon as there are a few swimming around together, it's almost like it reinforces their bravery.
I have had a friend bit in the water with me, and he was being aggressive and it didn't help, and he nearly lost his foot to it.
In this battle of apex predators, the intimidating blacktips have a natural advantage. This is their turf.
If there are too many blacktips in the area, then I'll just get on the boat and move away, because you're not going to win.
It's going to be one day that one will turn around and take his chances with me. It's better to just get out the water. It's their day, they've won, go home.
It is now 7 years since the mysterious appearance of the blacktips at Aliwal Shoal. In that time, they have tripled in number and begun to threaten people's livelihoods. As they grow in confidence, could they become dangerous too? Worldwide, we kill far more sharks than they attack us. Even so, every shark attack is a cause of concern.
3 separate shark attacks in just 2 days.
In Florida, blacktips are thought to be responsible for many of the hit-and-run attacks on surfers and bathers. Scientists believe these are often cases of mistaken identity, a shark confusing a human's hand or foot for a struggling fish. Could this scenario be repeated in South African waters?
There's controversy looming. 1 or 2 bites from a blacktip would see all blacktips as bad sharks. It's unavoidable that we're going to end up in this situation. They are a top predator.
But as Mark investigated the strange behavior of his sharks, it was becoming clearer that they were only part of the problem. People may also be to blame. The finger points at those running the multi-million-dollar industry, shark ecotourism, and the boats that drop bait every day trying to lure sharks for a show.
The shark diving side is quite a recent development on Aliwal. It was really pioneered and started by Mark Addison. A large number of the other operators now have jumped onto this bandwagon to go and dive with sharks.
Shark diving on Aliwal Shoal began in the late 80s, and now over a dozen companies compete to take tourists out to the reef. The daily appearance of sharks is vital for their existence.
Shark ecotourism and shark diving is becoming increasingly popular all around the world, and Aliwal Shoal is no exception. At the moment, there's 14 boats, 14 operators that on a daily basis throw probably 50 kilos of sardines into the water each day for these sharks. And that massive amount of extra food could have been just that tipping point, combined with the food that the sharks can gain from the shoal itself and the fishermen's food, plus the ecotourism food. Those three factors together could have just reached that tipping point so these sharks can get all their resources from this one area and they don't have to migrate away.
If the blacktips are staying at Aliwal because they have learned to take advantage of the dive operators as well as the fishermen, does this mean that Mark Addison is partly responsible for the mystery he has spent so long trying to solve?
You know, we did have an impact. If you'd done an isotope analysis of the gut content of blacktip at that time, you would have known that they were feeding with us and feeding on the sardines as they were responding to fishermen in the area.
The sharks have learned that food is plentiful here. That explains their numbers. Any long-term solution for breaking up the blacktip gang would have to address the practice of dumping bait in the water to attract sharks for tourists. But the profound change in the sharks' behavior is harder to explain. Solitary animals ganging together, even showing signs of intelligence and cooperation. One thing is certain though, wherever humans and animals come into conflict, no matter how intelligent the animals, humans usually win.
It's not widely spoken about, but some of the fishermen will take action. They will try and kill those sharks.
Blacktips have borne the brunt of the fishermen's vitriol.
There are roughly 400 species of shark in the world, but only 3 have protected status. Blacktips are not one of these, and this makes them vulnerable.
This is just disgusting. They've blasted right through, and you can just see the hole it's made. This one, they've taken the fishing line and wrapped it around her, hoping to constrict her around the gills and suffocate her.
With his blacktips under attack, Mark wants to prove how smart they are. But now his sharks have learned a new way to find easy food without bait in the water.
The sharks, we feel, are actually following the boats around.
There's no doubt these animals are learning.
But can Mark get scientific evidence to prove these groundbreaking shark theories?
Could be onto something, mate.
Maybe. What's crazy now is not going to be crazy in the future.
Since their arrival on the Aliwal Shoal in 2006, the blacktip shark gangsters have taken over the neighborhood using their superior numbers, their nerve, and what seems like innate cunning.
There's no doubt these animals are learning. I don't know if the blacktip sharks are more intelligent than other sharks, but on the whole, I think sharks are pretty smart.
Smarter sharks mean further problems for local fishermen who've noticed something chilling. The blacktips are now one step ahead of them.
We will go to a reef, find sharks there. We can't get fish out, we'll move to another reef. There's sharks there. The sharks, we feel, are actually following the boats around.
How could the sharks be there the instant the fishermen were? Dive operator Mark Addison has a hunch. He's already convinced the sharks are much smarter than scientists believed. Could they be smart enough to learn to link boats with food? To help him test the theory, he has called in shark learning expert Ryan Johnson.
Scientists are quite skeptical, and I'm no exception. It's a very nice boat to be in in Mark's boat where you can come up with these amazing hypotheses, and I have a lot of respect for that because that's how you advance science. But ultimately the science has to come in because you've got to test it, you've got to see if it's true.
Ryan has designed an experiment to test Mark's theory. They'll use a technique called acoustic telemetry to see if they can attract a shark without using bait.
This tag?
Okay.
We want to get this into a shark, into its mouth, let it retain it for 6-7 hours.
Okay.
Once it's doing its normal thing, then we want to replicate a fishing boat. You rev it up, rev it in, drive past, stop there.
Okay.
If the shark is conditioned to those engines, what it's going to do is start moving in. And as soon as it moves close to us, we're going to be able to hear it, and we're going to be able to track its movement towards or away from the boat.
Acoustic telemetry is one of the only ways of tracking groups of large marine animals. It requires the tag to be attached to one of the blacktips in some way. In this case, swallowed. Before the experiment proper can start, Mark and Ryan allow an hour for the sharks to leave the area and for any bait to clear from the water. Then it's time to get the motors going. If Mark is right, the engines alone should lure in the blacktips. Sharks can pick up sound over great distances. They will hear the engines as the boat zigzags over the reef, but will they associate the sound with a potential meal and respond?
Let's get that receiver set up now. Okay.
In the last hour, the blacktips could have covered several kilometers, but Ryan's receiver will only pick up a signal if the tagged shark comes back to within 500 meters of the boat.
So what am I listening for, Ryan? We're going to get like a high-pitched ping?
Yeah, you'll hear it. It'll be it's very distinctive. You ding, ding, ding.
Conditions are rough, and it's unlikely there are any other boats in the water. Mark's engine should be the only one the sharks can hear. But there's no sign of the tagged blacktip. So are they relating motor noise to food? Or is Mark's theory wrong?
Nothing.
For 30 minutes, there's nothing. Just the sound of the engine. But then, from out of the deep, a distant noise.
We're getting the ping. We're picking up the shark.
That's it.
That's it. It's probably within 200 meters of us now. Intriguing. Could be onto something, Mark.
With no bait in the water, the tagged blacktip seems to have homed in on the boat solely from the sound of its engines.
You know, when it gets up around 70, 75, you're probably within 30, 40 meters.
There is no doubt that the tagged shark, and in all probability other blacktips, have come to the boat. As it moves away, they follow.
Just the sound of an engine, and we got a little shark tracking along beside us.
Mark and Ryan's experiment strongly suggests that the Aliwal blacktips have learned to associate the noise of an outboard motor with the expectation of food.
Time that shark stayed with us was from, we picked it up here at 113 and down to 141.
Yes.
It's over a kilometre in distance. Our crucial point is if that shark was associating the sound of the motors with food, it would behave like that. So, it worked.
And that's
It has taken Mark 7 years of study to reach this point. The first tantalizing proof that blacktip sharks may be more complex and much smarter than anyone thought.
You know, that's powerful.
Now he hopes to convince the scientific community that what he is seeing every day on the reef is enough to make us think again.
To have somebody like Mark that's on the sea every day is hugely valuable because he's a person who sees things on a daily basis that could be new.
Mark's investigations are challenging both popular perception and scientific orthodoxy. His blacktips may not be mindless solitary killers, but sophisticated, intelligent gang members. Mark's groundbreaking theories have the potential to open up a whole new world of shark research.
We're into some very high-end stuff now, and I think the genetics, the communication is going to cause debate, it's going to cause division, and it's going to cause us to rethink sharks at many different levels. Maybe what's crazy now is not going to be crazy in the future.